I'm still out here just eating popcorn. Can you hear me now? Can you see me? Are we okay? Oh, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I was just trying to refresh. So we good? Give me a 1 through 5. How are you feeling about the AP World Test? Still lagging. Come on. Not the best night for trivia for Fiveable. Yeah, we're definitely lagging. It's okay. It's okay. Ooh, this is freaking out. I bet this is like freezing. I'm just out here eating my popcorn. All right. So yeah, the chat just flew. Um, it's okay. Trivia was an interesting thing. Yeah, I mean, like you can s- you can see the like what could come out of it. You know. Okay. All right. All right. All right. This is game day popcorn. You gotta have a game day snack. I saw some. All right, we good? Ah! Listen, the good news is you can go and play trivia anytime. Those questions are up. So even though live was just like kind of a mess, um, it's fine. Go, you can go play it. We just like I just sent out an email with a video of how to do it. We tweeted it how to do it, so it's there. Fiveable is losing our streak. All right, are we okay? Are you talking about lag right now? Or are you talking about lag? Okay. Okay. And then now you can hear me. This is what happens when you put a bunch of people stressed about something in a room, and then you just like make it a little bit uncomfortable, and then everyone freaks out. Come on, we good. You know we good now. You know we good. Y'all are gonna be chill. This is gonna be so useful anyways that you're not even gonna remember those first 7 minutes that were just a little bit too stressful. I'm gonna share the slides with you right now. We're gonna jump in. I've got so much to tell you about all the important things you gotta know about world history. All right, I'm grabbing the link so you can follow along with me. Stress, I know the stress levels are breached. It's just like rite of passage, you know? When's the Android app coming out? It's already out. You can download it on Android. Slides, link, and show. Follow along with the slides. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump in. Someone even suggested starting at like period 2. Yeah, I'm going to kind of go through period 1 very fast because period 1 is lame anyways, so you don't need it. All right, there we go. Now we're hopping in. Presenter view. What the heck? Oh, for Crowdcast. Crowdcast is not Fiveable. So like Crowdcast is what we use. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. I think we've just really overloaded our Wi-Fi even. What are you gonna do? I'm out here just like eating popcorn. I'm showing you guys how to be calm when things get stressful. Switch to Twitch. Yeah, man. All right, I'm sharing my screen. I promise you it will work, and I promise you this will be worth it. Just like having trouble. Shout out to Amanda. Thank you. Appreciate it. I've been here all night, just like, why won't my technology work? I'm not even stressed. I'm not even stressed. I'm not even stressed out. We're just, we're just straight chilling. Can you see my slides? Because I have a feeling that you can't. And that's not. Can you see my slides? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, let's try again. Nope, black. Nope, nope. We're studying till midnight. Yeah, we're gonna start. Hey, can we please start? Yeah, man. All right. Well, now you can see my slides. You can also see, you can just like follow along too. So go get a snack. We're gonna chill. This is not gonna be a high stress environment. So you can take your stress and put it on ice for a minute because I'm not doing that. Like we could have been all freaking out all this whole time, but like whatever. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna do some review tonight. I'm gonna go through everything, all the content. Tomorrow we're gonna talk about the LEQ with Patrick Lassiter. So bring your questions on that. Wednesday night we'll be live at 8 p.m. Eastern for one last minute questions and um, really a pep talk. So I'll give you another pep talk tonight too, but another a last minute one on Wednesday night. But we don't want you to stay up super late. So not too much studying on Wednesday, just last minute questions. 3 days till AP world exam. Ugh. All right, let's jump in. So period one is 5% of the test. Do not spend a lot of time on it. I'm going to show you really quick, big overview of period one. I'm going to spend less than 5 minutes on this. So in key concept one, early humans are migrating. This is your out of Africa theory. At first, they were foragers, hunter-gatherers. They didn't have any private wealth. They lived in small bands. Think about like Walking Dead. You know how they go from like moving around in small groups. It's just about survival. They can't support a bunch of people. They figure out how to use fire, which increases brain size because the food is more nutritious. The language is more complex. All right. Why is the audio still messed up? I'm on it. Claire, I need my headphones back. Oh my God. This is not my next. Beep, boop, boop. Claire. Claire. Yeah. I need my headphones. I'm gonna try it. My audio's not working. Sorry. I still haven't. I don't know, man. Oh God, it's so frustrating. I think just like, huh? No. Oh, you know why? I know why. It's because I had another tab open. Duh. The heck is this? All right, we're figuring this out, y'all. All right, we're back. We figured it out. I literally had another tab open with the same video. Ah. All right, give me an emoji. Give me the most calming emoji that you possibly can in the chat. Put the most calming emoji that you know of that like calms you down, that helps you just like de-stress. Put it in the chat because what the heck? It's one of those nights. Give me a calming emoji. Give me one to like calm down. One that you're just like, this makes me just like feel calm inside. I feel like okay, feel better about things. The money one, yikes. A shrimp. All right. We good? We yikes. Super yikes. Yes, we can start. Wow. All right. That was a mess. That was a mess. We're here. We're out here now. Okay, we're in full force. Okay, so basically all I said was you have Paleolithic foragers, then they figure out fire, and then language is better, more complex, food is more nutritious, right? And so then you've got the Neolithic Revolution. This is the like first agricultural revolution. Basically, people settle down and use irrigation, populations increase. Say it with me now. More food equals more people. More food equals more people. That is always the case. So this is what happens when the Neolithic Revolution starts. You finally get permanent settlements all around the world, all near rivers. They start up at different times, though. And those early societies have the same characteristics. They're all basically the same. They're large states with bureaucracies. Quick rundown of what bureaucracy means. Bureaucracy, think of like a bureau, right? So like where you keep clothes, you have drawers in different with different clothes in the different drawers. Everything is kind of separated. That's what a bureaucracy is. All the power and like responsibilities are separated by different people, right? There's education, there's state, there's war, there's tax, all those different things. And so all of these early societies have a bureaucracy. They all have agricultural surplus, which means not everybody has to be a farmer. They have monumental architecture. Writing. Leaders are using divine right, just like they do later on, too. And then, of course, they're competing against each other for resources. And that's period one. Yay! Round of applause. Give me a round of applause in the chat for period one. We're trying to make this a little more fun. Can you do this tomorrow? Yes. You can always watch the replay. Give me a round of applause for period one. And I am jumping to period two. This is just like, you know, life gives you lemons or something. All right, period two. Now, also not going to spend a whole lot of time in period two, but a little bit more. Period two is 15% of the exam. I'm still eating my popcorn. What? All right, religions in period two. Judaism and Hinduism really start, these are like your monotheistic religions. These start in period one, but some of the new religions from this time. You have Buddhism, which starts in India. Which is spread like in India by Ashoka. You have Taoism, which is Chinese philosophy. This is all about living in harmony and a balance, right, with nature. Think about the yin yang. Confucianism is about 5 relationships, right? Strict education system, patriarchy. All the relationships in that are patriarchal, right? It's like a relationship with the son, with the father, with the brother, with the king. Christianity, sort of like a Judaism 2.0, except with Jesus, right? It starts in the Middle East, it spreads into Europe, right? So it gets to all right. It gets to Europe, it gets to Rome. It becomes official in Rome in 313. That's one of the years you could remember, the Edict of Milan. The Greco-Roman philosophies. Oh yeah, I did make that. So so I apologize. So well, it's sort of like with Hinduism, it's kind of a blended one. It's like um well, yeah, but it's sort of like one god within many different beings. And so it's not necessarily monotheistic, it's not necessarily polytheistic. The Greco-Roman philosophies, this is all about reason and logic, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, each were students of the next. And cool. Animism are about like spirits within the natural world. So sort of outside of the core civilization. This is like, I don't know, this is the most basic example. If you think about like Pocahontas, how like the things come to life, it's sort of like that. Cool. All right, so these are religions, right? So obviously religions come up a lot in the rest of the time periods. You really got to have a strong foundation of them. Zoroastrianism is obviously another one, but that one doesn't come up as much because it doesn't have as much of a like historical impact. And so these are really the ones that these are the ones that you really got to know. Okay, so I would focus on these. Even legalism is sort of a little less because it's more about like laws. All right. Syncretic religions come up more later. Okay. Zoroastrianism is monotheistic. Okay. Some of the states and empires to know in this time period. You've got Persia, right? So the Achaemenid, the Parthian, the Sassanid Empire, Alex the Great, who then conquers Greece, the royal roads. Persia, if you have to pick one empire here to study the least, I would say Persia. But obviously it's historically important, but just in terms of like what actually comes up on the test, we're making guesses here. Actually, this can have subtitles. Check that out. I gave myself subtitles. Thank you, Google. Okay, in China, you have the Qin Dynasty. The Qin Dynasty only lasts for 14 years, but it's super important because it actually unifies China, right? It is all about legalism, like the use of legalism and the use of laws to actually like, govern. Yeah, the subtitles are dope, right? Then you have the Han Dynasty, which is the biggest part of the classical era. And so after the Qin Dynasty falls, it's only 14 years they're around. Han comes to power. They're in power for about 400 years, really being the like Eastern version of like Rome, keeping it strong over in the East and connecting the Silk Roads. Confucianism starts, I think, yes, I mean, Han are definitely Confucian, right? So they have, I'm not sure when exactly the year that it starts, but the Han Dynasty is very much like focused on education, right? The civil service exam. And so Confucianism is a big part of their foundation. Okay, and moving over to India, you have the Mauryan Dynasty and the Gupta Empire. The Mauryan Dynasty is where where Ashoka was. So Ashoka is like one of the most important Indian leaders to know. Is definitely in the classical era. Ashoka put up rock and pillar edicts that reminded people where what the laws of Buddhism were, so that it helped spread it. Right. So it's hard to watch myself with like the subtitles. A little bit weird. Anyways, the Mauryan dynasty is really important because of the spread of Buddhism. Gupta is when it's really sort of the like golden era of classical India. This is where you have a lot of like peace, things are pretty calm. So you have a lot of innovation, science, technology. Some of the questions about the warring states. The warring states were in China before the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty unified them after the period of warring states. Okay, in Greece you have the Hellenistic empires. Just remember the word Hellenistic means Greek. They're known for democracy. They're known for wars, a lot of like interstate wars, and they are eventually conquered by Alexander the Great. Some of the questions that we're getting, and I'm going to go through the list of questions you have below. Once we are done with period 1 and 2, I'll go through those. I'll just check to see if there's any specific questions about period 2. So definitely upvote the questions so I can focus on the ones that are most upvoted. Quick questions about Mandate of Heaven starts in period 1, but it goes all the way up until the last empire falls, which is in the beginnings of the 20th century. Okay, so in Rome, there are actually 3 time periods of Rome. There is the kingdom, the republic, the empire. Most of what you'll be talking about on the AP exam is the actual empire, the Roman Empire. So this is like Augustus, Constantine, right? It becomes Christian once it's like once it's legalized, not legalized. It's what's the word? Can't think of the word. It's made not illegal, but then it's finally made mandatory. Rip Ching. Okay, over in Mesoamerica, classical Mesoamerica, you have Teotihuacan, which is in Mexico, the Mayans, which is in sort of Mexico as well, Mochi is in Peru, and so decriminalized. Thank you, Allison. So in Mesoamerica, the things to know about these 3 are that they are classical and that they are really foundational to the Aztecs and the Incas, and so. People ask like, do I need to know something specific about these 3? Honestly, not really. They are kind of all very similar. Just think of like what we went through before. They have bureaucracies, they have trade, they have technology, So just think of it that way. Okay. All right, so the things to remember, y'all, is, let's see. Whoop. Just trying to figure out. Okay. The things to remember about these classical civilization is that how they all rose to power. You could definitely get a question about that. Is a couple of reasons. They're bureaucratic, right? They have different ways to support a large empire. They all have coded law systems like 12 tables, Justinian's code. They use roads to connect them where trade is heavy, and they have strong militaries and oftentimes use slavery. So this is like how they actually rose to power. How they fall to power, you have environmental Damage, like deforestation, outside invasion, internal revolts, disease. These are all the same reasons. These 2 bullet points, by the way, work for all of world history. Any empire that's come to power, any empire that's fallen to power, this is why. This is one of these reasons. And I did a whole stream on just rise and fall of empire back in October. So with Fiveable Plus, you can see all of that. Okay, last thing about period 2 is trade. So there's basically 4 major trade routes. There are the Trans-Saharan, the Mediterranean, the Silk Roads. These are both Silk Roads here. And then the Indian Ocean, right? So you've got those 4, the Silk, Sea, and Sand routes. Make sure you know where they are. These are hella important. Okay, all of them help to spread things like new technology, like yokes. That's when you like tie 2 animals together so you can use both of their power instead of just one. Saddles on camels, on horses, stirrups to actually put your feet in, like when you're riding a horse. That's where the stirrups are. Lateen sails, dhows, junks, better boats, better ways of navigation. Some of the things that were traded: rice, cotton, qanat technology, right? This is the irrigation system that the Persians figured out that then was traded to Asia. Disease is traded, like smallpox. And then, of course, religions. Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism are 3 of the big religions that are traded in this time period. Okay, so I want to get to some of the big picture stuff here. So what are some of the things that you could be asked to analyze in terms of causation for periods 1 and 2? And so remember, this is 8,000 to 600. Well, some of the things that could come up are rise of empires, right? So we just talked about that. Why do empires rise? Centralized government, food surplus, infrastructure, technology. What are the effect of an empire rising to power? More expansion of states. You know, they could expand their power in a certain land area. And then trade will diffuse technology, ideas. Okay, as long as there are strong empires, there's a lot of trade. The fall of empires. Why? Disease, corruption, expansion, too much expansion. Now I can't control it all. Invasions. Religions of salvation is when you care more about your afterlife than your present life. So like Christianity did that. So one of the reasons why Rome fell is literally because of the spread of Christianity. Some of the effects when an empire falls, what happens? Trade is totally destabilized. Things move back to local rule. You don't have as much innovation. This is why in Europe, after the fall of Rome, it's the Dark Ages. Some of the things that you could compare in periods 1 and 2, you could compare the use of religion in politics, right? Where there's differences between a ruler is a god, like Egypt, to a ruler is chosen or justified by the gods, like the mandate of heaven. The ruler might convert to a religion to gain power, like Constantine or Ashoka. Then you have the role of women that you could compare. In Rome or Greece, it's a patriarchy. Women had some land. Upper class women had some literacy, could own a business. In India, same thing, patriarchy, but also caste. And so women could not own land and could not have citizenship. They could not reach the Enlightenment, right? So women were pretty much always relegated to a caste to stay within the cycle. In China, same thing, patriarchy, also couldn't have land. Women in upper class did have literacy, no citizenship. Because of Taoism, there was some more equality, especially within Taoist communities. Women are always suppressed. Yeah, I mean, that's basically if you ever have to do it, if you do a similarity about women in different places, they are suppressed. They don't have the same rights everywhere. Some of the big changes in periods 1 and 2, Rise and fall of empires are huge. So listen, if you're gonna like memorize a few things before Thursday, I would really know like these slides because these are basically telling you what the huge things are. We know what are the big things that are happening. So rise and fall of empires, agriculture leads to social hierarchy, which leads to patriarchy, new technologies in both of these systems, new belief systems. Some of the continuities, people are always migrating all the way from out of Africa to classical migrations, and trade is always happening. Boom. All right, so we did period 1 and 2. Oh my God, there's so many questions. Let me just see really quick if there are any big questions about, okay. Go over China, yeah. Okay, all right, so not too many questions about, these are, all right, I'll definitely answer these questions, but I'll get to them later. All right, round of applause for period 2. Give me a round of applause in the chat. Maybe, you know, either a round of applause or an emoji that describes how you feel about period 2. Yeah, and please upvote the questions because I definitely won't have time to answer them all. Clap, 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 clap. Period 2 is done. All right, for period 3, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to talk about the big picture things with the key concepts, and then we're going to jump into the like big patterns. Okay, so we're on track to still finish on time. If you're on the East Coast, I know it's going to get kind of late. Totally understand if you want to come back to it. If you are, you know, not on the East Coast, then buckle in. Okay, so period 3, key concept 3.1 is basically trade continued. Right, so at this point, though, trade is dominated by the Islamic empires, the Mongols, and the Vikings. Those are your big 3 traders in this time period. Some of the new cities that come up on the trade routes are Timbuktu, Huangzhou, Baghdad, Venice, and Malacca. New or more luxury goods are being traded: spices, silk, porcelain, gems, exotic animals from Africa. They would literally ship animals. Some of the new technologies that come about: camel saddles, caravanserai. Think of like the Holiday Inn of the Silk Roads. That's what a caravanserai is. Where they would sort of like stop on the way. Like on your way to the next destinations, I would stop and hang out here for a few nights. And that's where a lot of the like trading of ideas happen because you're sitting around people, you're hanging out, you know, they're talking about all kinds of different things. New navigations, better navigations. You have the compass from China, the astrolabe, which is Hellenistic, sort of like a GPS kind of thing. Bigger ships. Some of the new economic tools they were using are like paper money, which is called flying cash, credits, loans, trading organizations in order to actually like work together more, like the Hanseatic League of Northern Europe. It's basically like a bunch of different guilds. Big migrations of this time period are the Bantu, the Polynesian. Those are like big ones. There are also plenty of other migrations happening within these trade routes. For example, diasporas of the Sogdians, of Muslim merchants. It's a lot more. These are 2 of the big ones. Oh, here we go. Diasporas. Okay, so migrations, Bantu and Polynesian. Diasporas, Muslims coming from the Middle East moving outward to Indian Ocean. And a diaspora, remember, is just when you leave your homeland and you don't come back. And so there's a real spread of these cultures because people have done that. Jews from the Mediterranean are leaving because of persecution. And then Chinese are moving into Southeast Asia. Sogdian are merchants in like Central Asia. Dope. Okay, and then a couple of explorers of this time period: Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, Zheng He. Marco Polo is from Italy. He's traveling east. Ibn Battuta is from the Middle East, also traveling east. Zheng He is from China. He's the only one that travels west. His book's called Journeying to the West. Let's see. Yeah, the question about were the Bantu migrations in both period 1 and 3. Yeah, they sort of go over a long time. All right, so this is like your real quick recap of trade. The politics and state building of the time. You have the Islamic Caliphates. Okay, so the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Delhi Sultanate, which starts at the very end of this time period. Al-Andalus is just the Muslim empire within Spain. All of the Islamic caliphates were incredibly big on trade and conquest. So remember that even within the Quran, there is a support of trade. And so because of that, it's very high, it's regarded very positively in terms of trade in Islam. That's like your real basic, recap of the Islamic caliphates. The Mongols, caliphates just means the name of like a state in the name of an Islamic state. It's like an Islamic empire. It's just called a caliphate. Okay, the Mongols, you have 4 khanates, right? You have the Golden Horde in Russia. You have the Yuan dynasty in China, the Chagatai in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate are in the Middle East. The Mongols are known for trade, immense amount of trade. They're really the in-between of the entire landmass of Eurasia. Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan, that's the leader. They come to power because he was such a master of conquest. They really practiced religious tolerance. The Mongols just didn't really care about religion all that much. As long as you were cool with the Mongols being in charge, they were fine with whatever. You can practice whatever you want to practice, but as long as you understand that it's the Mongols in charge here, and so that would be the only thing that would stand in their way of tolerance. They are the largest land empire to ever exist. The largest sea empire to ever exist was Great Britain, I believe. The Byzantine Empire, it's basically like Eastern Rome. Rome falls in the west and it's gone, and then Rome in the east is sort of splits off, and so it continues. And so that's a CCOT thing, right? So Justinian is the big emperor to remember from the Byzantine Empire. Caesaropapism was when you have sort of the Caesar and the Pope ruling, and so it's both like religion and state. And they're Eastern Orthodox, so this is where you have the schism that splits Christianity in East and West. So you have, more like Protestantism, or we have Roman Catholicism, which will then split in further into Protestantism, and then in the East, you have Eastern Orthodox. Caesar over Pope. Okay, in China, the 3 dynasties to know in this time period are the Sui, Tang, and Song. Know the Chinese dynasty song if you don't already. Totally worth it. The Sui are really more about the Grand Canal is the biggest thing that they did. The Tang, the things to remember is that they brought back the civil service exam. They were incredibly bureaucratic. They were really intense on their tax system. The Song developed paper money and just really continued to produce new technologies for China, and that were then spread elsewhere. In the Americas, you have the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas. They just don't come up a whole lot on the exams. They are also bureaucratic. They also practice trade. They also use religion to legitimize their rule, right? So you have human sacrifice. You have expansion and conquest. Same things as the rest of them. In Europe and in Japan, you have feudalism. where in Europe, after the fall of Western Rome, you have you really have just a more decentralized time where there isn't really one empire that's taken back control. There are a few, like the Charlemagne of the Franks, who does take some control, but doesn't really conquer the whole thing. And in Japan, same thing. It's very decentralized, not a lot of innovation. This is the time of the samurai. Okay, and the last key concept in period 3 is about economic productivity. So, again, more crops in this time equals more people. More crops, more food, more people. Some of the crops were champa rice, which was given from Vietnam to China. In agriculture, some of the like innovations were chinampas, which are the like floating gardens that the Incas did, the Aztecs. They were in the Americas. I wish you weren't like 15-second lag for me. Gives me a minute. Okay, so increased production, increased urbanization. Urbanization is just the rise of cities, you know, more people moving to cities. Aztecs. Okay, Chinampas, Aztecs. You guys are way more well versed in all this stuff than I am because you're like in it every single day. You're doing a good job. I'm proud of you. Okay, so some of the cities that rose are Venice, Calicut in India, Baghdad in modern-day Iraq. Some of the cities that fell would have been Athens, Rome, Chang'an. Chang'an is just like, you know, the Rome of China. Why did they fall? Because of invasions, because of agricultural decline, the Little Ice Age that really shook things up and lead to population decline. Some fun new social changes. Peasants are starting to be freed. Nomadic pastoralists are a new type of like social class. This would be the Mongols. Guilds, where you are working together. You're like forming economic alliances and working together to not be as risky. Coerced labor is when the different forms of coerced labor, like slavery, like encomienda system, like indentured servants. Changes in terms of military obligations. Some of the religious revolts that happened in this time period are the White Lotus Revolt, also known as the Red Turban Revolt in China, which is what actually moved it to the Ming Dynasty. This was a religious revolt. The spread of religion was massive here. Religion spread a lot, especially Christianity and Buddhism. And they both affected gender relations. Okay, they all affected gender relations, giving women some more rights, especially in terms of literacy. And then family structure. The Lotus Revolt is just what ended what was before the Ming Dynasty? The Yuan. See if you guys remember that Chinese dynasty song. Okay, so big picture, big ticket items in period 3. And I know, like, based on this, after the Yuan, based on this poll that we did, you guys are most freaked out about period 3. So this is like these next 3 slides. This is where it's at. Okay, so some of the possible topics for period 3. What could you be asked about in a causation way? You know, on the LEQ, or even in the DBQ, or on an SAQ. You could be asked about why the causes and effects of the spread of religions. Right. So the 3 big religions that are spreading. Oh, I should have mentioned Islam in the last slide. The 3 big religions that are spreading are Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. These are like massively spreading to really the world. And so why are they spreading? Missionaries. All 3 of these religions are universalizing religions, which means that one of the purpose of them, or one of the tenets of them is to spread the religion itself, whereas like Hinduism and Judaism are ethnic religions, and so you really just are kind of born into it, and maybe people convert, but less likely. So missionaries are the people who actually go out into the world and try to spread the religion. Merchants are another big piece of this. Merchants, Christian, Buddhist, and Muslim merchants who are out and trading and exchanging ideas. And then, of course, the expansion of states. So the fact that like the Islamic empires are conquering territory, that's why there is such a large percentage of Muslims that do live in North Africa, because the Islamic empires conquered the area. And so that's the impact of it. So those are your three big effect or causes for the spread of religion. Effects, you have diffusion of ideas and more migrations of people. It's unifying in different regions. And then it can increase the amount of conflict, especially when there is division within the religion, like in Christianity, like in Islam, like in Buddhism. There's always like divisions in them. Spread of disease. Some of the causes for why disease spread is the same reason. Merchants, trade networks would be the big one. But expansion of states could go here as well. And then as a result of the Black Death, of smallpox, you have depopulation, a huge decrease in the population. You also, like as a unintended effect, you have more opportunities for marginalized communities. So because there were, like at a certain point, like there were rules about who could work where, right? So they could say maybe no women, no Jews, no peasants, no lower class can have this job. As people are dying because of the Black Death, the like desperation for labor increases, and so the rules go out the window. And so instead of saying this person is not allowed to have this job, it was just sort of like, if you're alive and you don't have the plague, come work for me. I don't care who you are, what gender you are, what religion you are. It doesn't matter anymore because I just need living people to come work for me. So as a result, women get more rights, peasants get more rights, Jews get more opportunities. That also creates then a backlash because that's happening. It like there's a backlash of it that seems like it basically blames those three groups for spreading the plague in the first place, as if it were like on purpose to get more opportunities. Oppression. Okay. Some things you could compare in this time period would be political organizations like feudalism, or like centralized bureaucracies, or decentralized, right? So looking at just how the different empires of the time period break down into like buckets here, right? So you have, feudalism, centralized, and decentralized organizations. Yeah, if they ask you to compare feudalism, that would be brutal. I would feel really bad for you. I'm going to be honest. I really hope they don't. In terms of trade, you have land and maritime, right? So you can compare them. Silk roads, on land trade networks, you have luxury goods being traded because they're light and they're worth a lot. So if I'm traveling on a horseback or on a camel and I'm going to go a far distance, I want to bring as much with me as I can that's really like expensive, because I don't want to carry it. I just want to make sure that this is worthwhile. Whereas if I'm on a boat, I can put as many heavy things in my boat as I want, and it doesn't matter. I can make as many trips as I want. I'm not literally carrying it on my back. So bulk goods on water, luxury goods on land. Keep that in mind. Okay. Some of the changes in period 3, new technologies, spread of Islam. itself is a massive change. The fact that Western Europe and Japan are decentralized are huge changes. The rise of cities. All right, yeah, this is getting super annoying. You guys are about to get banned, y'all. This is the last warning. Okay. Well, I gotta stop my teaching. Cool. All right, so just like still out here eating my popcorn, straight chilling. All right, some of the continuities. Patriarchy. Patriarchy is always continuing, right? Limited roles for women. That's just like a continuity straight through the course. Diffusion of ideas, where you have just like a continuity of trade. Trade is always happening. Can I go over Japanese feudalism again? Don't spend too much time on it. It's just decentralized. Yeah. All right. Let me check the questions, see about period 3, what you got. Looks like most of you guys, you've been doing a really awesome job answering your own questions in here too. All right. Keep going, guys. You're doing awesome. All right, give me a round of applause for period 3. We're done with period 3. Onwards, period 4. We're doing good. We're doing each time period in about 20 minutes. Decentralized means that there's no like one power in the middle, like holding it together, right? So like, most states now are centralized. There's a central government, but decentralized would mean that there is no central government, and there's instead like local rulers or usually just local rulers. Okay, period 4. Key concept 4.1, globalization. You have explorers, Henry the Navigator, Columbus, Vasco da Gama, moving from, Europe out to the Americas, to West Africa, to India. Then you have new technologies spreading, like the improved astrolabe, better maps, wind patterns, caravels, small ships, just tons of new pieces of technology that's making trade easier. It's expanding the amount of trade that happens. The actual circulation of goods in this time period is called the Columbian Exchange. This has to be like the single most or top 5 most important world history events ever, because this completely changes everything. From Afro-Eurasia to the New World, to the Americas, would be things like corn, potatoes, cocoa, chocolate. From the Americas back to Europe were things like disease, slaves, sugar. Oh, this is opposite. This is from Europe to the Americas would have been disease, slaves, sugar. From the Americas to Europe would have been corn, potatoes, cocoa. We good. Asia is also incredibly involved here because you have silver flowing from the Americas to Asia. The Europeans are transporting it between countries using the, what are they called? The ships. I'll pretend that I'm quizzing you. The Spanish ships that transported silver. Plus 100 points if you get this right. Nah, they're not junks. There's a specific name for them. Galleons. Thank you. The Spanish galleons. Dope. You guys are so ready for this. Look at that. Look at how many people know that. Manila galleons. Yeah, because they'd go to like the Philippines. Joint stock companies are a new economic tool that are being used to make like trade easier. So you have the VOC, which is Dutch, and then you have the British East India Company, which is their joint stock companies are basically like early version of like crowdfunding, where instead of funding the trade on your own, you would pool money together with this, like with a company, and that would then help facilitate trade. The impact of globalization, because of all these things, everything is getting more connected. You got to know the word globalization. Things are becoming more connected economically, politically, culturally. It starts off slow, and then we get all the way to today where you have, a Game of Thrones episode on and the entire world stops while it's watching. And so that's like, how fast things have moved. But back then, the impact of globalization was just the spread of religions, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism continuing to spreading further into the world, into the Americas, right, into Africa, into Asia. Syncretic, really, like actual new religions. So syncretic religions means that there's a blending of two ideas. Vodun is like voodoo. This is West African spiritualization connected with Christianity. And so this was in the Caribbean. Cult of Saints is in Latin America. This is like Latin American traditions mixed with Christianity. This is where you get the like I can't think of her name. The Latin American like saints. Sikhism is another one where this is in India. This is the combination of Islam and Hinduism. Also, innovations in arts, the Renaissance, woodblock printing, kabuki theater in Japan. Do not spend any time studying the Renaissance. Just know that it is a resurgence of art, of classical art brought back, right? So because everyone's just sort of like the rest of the world had been existing in a somewhat global sphere, and then you have, and then you actually have like some Europe being a part of that, and it's facilitating even more globalized, societies. And so because of that, there's just like way more connections, way more technologies happening, and art is supported by that. What about the Middle Ages? So the Middle Ages is period 3. Okay. All right. 4.2. So because the global demand for goods increased, new labor systems appeared, right? They need to actually like produce the goods. So peasant labor in Siberia increased. Coerced labor. For example, the Spanish use of the Inca Mita system to mine silver. All forms of coerced labor are terrible. This is not something you want to be working in. You are being forced to work in this job. You don't have a choice. So the natives that were forced to work in the silver mines, which was incredibly dangerous and horrible. Encomienda or hacienda systems, where they would basically like kind of trade labor for religious or language education. Indentured servitude, which is more temporary labor to pay off debt. You could get your like passage paid for, but you then had to work for 7 years to pay it off. And then, of course, chattel slavery, where this is the most harsh form of coerced labor, where people literally equaled property. And so that's how decisions were made. It was made around, I own this thing, this is my property, and they would apply those ideas to people. And so this is the Atlantic slave trade. Just remember, the Atlantic slave trade is one part of the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is the entire global circulation of goods. That's what it's called. And so the Atlantic slave trade is just one of those like goods that are being shipped. People are profiting off of this. People are doing pretty good, right? So some of those groups that are doing better, that are rising up into the class ranks, are the Manchus in China, the Creoles in Latin America, some of the existing elites that are making even more money, that are profiting off of things. The European nobles are doing great. The zamindars, the daimyo, Um, all right. Some of the social changes because of these things, European men were depending more and more on Southeast Asian women, and then all small families in Europe. And then you have the castas. So just more so in this time period than ever before, or really for the first time, there's like racial hierarchy. And so the, you know, the different like blending of races in South America was encouraged in order to whiten the society, whereas in North America it was prohibited in order to keep the groups segregated, to keep like the white people pure. And so you have in the Americas, you have mestizos, which would be European plus native. You have mulattoes, which would be European plus black. And then the Creoles were basically like Spanish descent, but living in the Americas. So the Creoles were kind of the whitest of the top, except for the Peninsulares, which were up top above them because they were born in Spain or in Portugal, in the peninsula. So of people who are born in the Americas, Creoles would be at the top. Cruising, y'all. All right, state building in period 4. Basically, period 4 is all about power. Who has it? How do you keep it? How do you expand it? Right? So how do I keep my power? Well, I could use arts, just like they did in like building the pyramids. I want to build things up and I want to show how rich I am. I want to flaunt my goods. And so building architecture like the Taj Mahal, or using like increased literature, being all like sophisticated in ways to be more to flaunt your power. Using religion like the divine right of kings in Europe, or human sacrifice in the Aztecs, or bureaucracy, right, where all of these different people did. The civil service exam in China, the Devshirme in Ottoman Empire. Divine right is basically where you, as that king, have the right to rule. It's the gods are giving me the right to rule. Okay, who actually has the power in this time? There are 2 groups of empires. There's land empires, the Manchus, the Mughals, the Ottomans, the Russians. These would be the big ones. And maritime empires, where you have the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, the British, right? These are all the European empires that go and colonize the rest of the world. And they're competing with each other for power. You have competition over trade between the Ottomans and the Europeans, state rivalries, the 30-Year War, Ottomans versus Safavid. You have local resistance, like peasant uprisings, samurai revolts. So there's a lot of different, this is like the most concise, nice little explanation of period 4 politics, right? Maintaining power, who has the power, competing for power. All right, so taking a step back, some of the causation that comes up in period 4. Columbian exchange. What causes it? Well, they're searching for faster trade routes and for new markets because they're producing more goods. The effects, true globalization, right? Before we weren't connecting the Americas and Afro-Eurasia. Increased exchange of crops, disease, cultures. Population in America goes down. Population goes up everywhere else because, say it with me, more food equals more people. Even though there is the slave trade in Africa, the slave trade does not decrease the population in Africa. It changes the gender balance, so in some regions, but the population declines only in the Americas because of disease. It increases everywhere else. Coerced labor systems. Why? Because of plantation economies. You have the need for more workers. Like actually producing things like cotton, tobacco, sugar are very labor intensive. You have to have a lot of people working in that to make it happen. And then the natives that they had first enslaved in the Americas were dying. And so in order to replace the labor need, they turned to Africa to import slaves. Effects of that, you have the Atlantic slave trade system, which is massively profitable for Europe. You have the encomienda system. You have racism in the Americas, right? You have the castas, just like the entire idea of racial hierarchies. All the issues around racism that we have today are stemming back from this time, because we're specifically now saying not only do people equal property, we're saying Black people equal property, which is clearly a problem and very foundational for the rest of what's happened in any place that was involved in that. Right? Anywhere in the world that was involved in the slave trade, whether it was in Europe or in Africa with African kings supporting that, or in the Americas with, in North America, in the colonies, in Latin America, anyone that was involved in the slave trade is now affected by that, because that was the foundation of their governments. So, effects, some of the other things that you could compare. You could compare the actual effects of the Columbian Exchange, right? So you have the New World. The effect on the Americas would be disease, depopulation, slave trade. Effects of the Columbian Exchange on Afro-Eurasia would be increased population because of crops. You could compare Europeans in the world. Spain and Portugal were really on the search for money, gold, God, spreading Christianity, and glory, expanding their empire to be the biggest empires in the world. England was much more about settlement colonies like Jamestown. So there was actual more British families moving. The French and the Dutch were more focused on trade routes and alliances. So a little bit of differences between them, but they're all in search of more money, right? They're all trying to make money off of what's happening. Some of the big changes in this time period: scientific and navigation revolutions. The flute. Freeman said it earlier, and I forgot how he pronounced it. Caravel, heliocentrism, right? So scientific revolution with the telescope, we're now understanding that our sun is in the middle of the solar system rather than the Earth, where people used to think that we were at the center. We no longer do. OW means old world. Okay. Globalization. Oh, obviously. Okay. So the role of women, how did that change? Universal education becomes a thing in some places. Industry replaced traditional roles. Migrations of men changed the role of women in certain areas. Christianity was reformed. Protestant and Catholic reformations in this time period. New technologies changed how fast we could travel and to where. And then some of the continuities would be the continued trade, continued diffusion of religion, ideas, goods, disease. Boom. Period 4, man. We're doing good. Yeah, this top question is awesome. I'm definitely going to answer these questions. We're doing a really good job. Okay. How are we doing? Let me get a 1 through 5. How helpful has this been so far? 5 meaning like this is super helpful. A 1 meaning like, I don't know, I didn't even need any of this. 1 through 5, how helpful has this been? And I'll get going on period 5. All right, sweet. All right, so we're feeling good. We're feeling this is helpful. 5s, 4s, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Sweet. All right, I will get to your questions. We're going to jump into period 5 right now. We're doing awesome on time, even though we had like a crazy thing going on at the beginning. But I know all your things are going by so fast. That's all right. It'll slow down. Sweet. I love you, 3000. All right, period 5. Period 5 is so easy to organize because it is specifically, all right, chill on the numbers. We get it. Period 5, like the way that the key concepts work, makes it so easy. So it's literally industrialization, imperialism, revolutions, migrations. Okay, so in the first one, in industrialization and capitalism, what do you need to know? The Industrial Revolution begins in Great Britain. Why? Because of resources like coal, because they had experienced population growth and they had enough people to be workers. They had property rights. They had enough capital near rivers and canals. So they had water sources to support that energy. So it starts in Great Britain and then spreads outward to Western Europe, to the rest of the world eventually. Some major tech advances include the steam engine, which used coal and was able to produce a lot more stuff a whole lot quicker. It also increased the global demand for raw materials and markets. So if I'm going to be making stuff a whole lot faster, now I need to increase the number of materials that I have to actually make things with, right? So I need more rubber. I need more, like cotton to make more textile. I can make clothes and different goods like rugs or different things like with a machine. And so now I need the cotton faster. And now I'm producing so much stuff, I need markets to sell it to people, right? So now it's worth it to take over the world so that I have more markets to sell my stuff to. Some of the tools, the economic tools used here are capitalism. That's Adam Smith, right? That's just the idea that, you can make as much money as you can make, right? So like it's free market. You can build a business and you can succeed. You can build a business and it can fail. The market will decide those things. And the government shouldn't have any say in it. The market will go. Liberalism, this is Mill, John Stuart Mill, where it's just about like the government then supporting people more in terms of ways in which the government can support people. Stock markets begin in this time period, the gold standard. You don't got to get too deep into these economic tools, just sort of basic. Mercantilism, yeah, good on that one. Okay, new transportations, communications, obviously railroads. Think about that DBQ last year. Steamships. Being able to get across the Atlantic super fast changed everything, right? So instead of having to spend weeks on a boat going to the Americas and then back, we can get there a whole lot faster. We can get there within a few days. Canals, building of the Erie Canal, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, which is basically being able to link water across land. And so, going through like into the Great Lakes to connect to Erie, or connect to the different land around that area. Suez would have connected in Egypt the the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. So instead of having to go all the way around, that's massive, right? And I don't have to go all the way around Africa. I can cut through now. The Panama Canal is in in Central America, in Panama. So instead of, again, having to go all the way down South America, now I can cut through. And then, of course, the telegraph, being able to talk to people. This is so massive. Like, one of the reasons why we have so much innovation right now is because people can talk to each other across the world in real time. And that's like, that will always lead to more invention, more ideas. And so this is the change in this time period. Because of all these different industrialized concepts, workers around the world are starting to organize in unions for better wages, better working hours, better conditions. Some like alternative visions are, of like a world that we're not living in a capitalist society. What else could this look like? You have Marxism, you have anarchism, Marxism would have just said we need to do away with classes. We can't have this. Classes won't work because the bottom one will always overthrow the top one. Anarchism would be like, let's do this without strict government. Let me be. Some countries resisted industrialization and westernization, like in China, the Qing dynasty, the Ottomans, at first really resisted it. We don't want that. We don't need that. But then eventually, embraced it. Some countries were just sort of like late to the game, like Japan, right? So like the Meiji Restoration, like Russia, where at this point now you have to have, and these guys too, because they were both late to the game for different reasons. Now they needed to have the government more involved in actually industrializing, right? Putting money into that. So it's not necessarily like private industry doing it, it's the government doing it. Boom, industrialization. Okay, so because of all of this, then we get imperialism, right? So why do we have imperialism? Because you need more markets, because you need more materials to support an industrialized economy. Also, ideas like social Darwinism, which you guys were talking about before, and the white man's burden, where you have, like racist beliefs that it was literally the duty of white cultures to basically like save any non-white cultures, right? To bring, ideas of like civilization to Africa and Asia and the Americas, right? So this is driving a lot of that, especially things like, all of it. So those are the causes. How did they imperialize? Several different ways. Sometimes they used diplomacy. They would sign treaties with the Native Americans. It wasn't fair, but they would sign treaties. So, for example, put a treaty in English and have Native American tribes sign it, even though they don't speak English or read in English, and then taking control over them in that way. Or even like the Berlin Conference, right? Where you have a bunch of European dudes sitting around a table divvying up Africa. They're not fighting each other over it. They're just literally deciding, you get this one, you get this one. So it's diplomatic, but it's still like brutal. Sometimes there's warfare. So you have, the Belgians in the Congo fighting for them. And then the third way is economic. So where like the Opium Wars in China, like the Monroe Doctrine, which gave America like the supposed freedom to get involved in like South American affairs. But economic imperialism is basically when you take control of another country through like making them dependent on you for economic reasons, whereas like all these other types are much more like political. Cultural is the last type though, where it happens when then there's you're imposing your culture on a group of people. Forced assimilation of Native Americans in America would have been an example of like cultural imperialism, forcing people to speak English rather than native tongues. The effects of imperialism. So you have colonies continuing, like in British India, the Raj, like Dutch Indonesia. Both of those colonies had existed before 1750, but now they're going to be like even more in direct control of them. The states are expanding. America is expanding, right? So in this time period, you have America becoming a country and then expanding to all the way west to control the entire, land that the U.S. has now under the Manifest Destiny. Russia expands. Japan expands. Some states are dissolving, like in the Balkans for independence. Egypt gets like semi-independence. Europe in North Africa is dissolving like the prior states that are there. This question of like what exactly is Manifest Destiny? It's basically the idea that there is the it is the destiny of America to exist from coast to coast. And so you should move west. It's the destiny of Americans to move west, and anything that comes in the way must be stopped because we need to get there. Settler colonies are colonies where people literally like would actually move there. And so whereas in India, there wasn't a huge population of British people who moved to India, some to like control it and like others that just sort of wanted to move there. But for the most part, British people didn't move to India. But in South Africa, in America, in Australia, British people did move there and populated those settler colonies. And then, of course, a loss of native culture. So in any of the places that were colonized, you have a really big impact on traditional cultures, on language, on religion, on their own histories, on all of it. Okay, so cutting into revolution, still doing awesome right now. So the catalyst for all the revolutions are, really quick. Here, I'll touch on Australia really quick. Australia just like doesn't come up on it, but essentially settler colonies, as Australia was a penal colony, which means that they would literally send prisoners to Australia. It's a faraway place, put them over there. Nobody's really there. Of course, there were people there, and the Aboriginals were basically decimated for the same reasons that native tribes in the US were, or in the Americas were. The other thing to know about Australia is then by the end of this time period, you have a Keep Australia White policy, where it was basically like, preventing immigration from non-white countries. Cool. All right, we're still moving. Okay, so revolution. The catalyst to the revolution across the board is the Enlightenment, right? So you have Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire, who thought about religious tolerance, Rousseau, who is the social contract, Locke is natural rights, Montesquieu is the three branches of government. So these are sort of the like four of the big Enlightenment thinkers. All of these things are leading to people to really start to question, like, are we living in the best version of a government that we can? Or is there a better way to do things? And so the three documents that come up here are the Declaration of Independence for American Revolution, the Declaration of Rights of Man for the French Revolution, and the Jamaica Letter, which is Simon Bolivar. All three are basically saying the same thing, that there is a right that, that men have to establish their own government, their own rule of law against a tyranny, right? It's a totally new way of looking at it. There are several revolutions happening here. Something to note is, like, don't spend that long on the French Revolution because it's not really in the key concepts anymore. It's worth noting that it happened and it's part of this, but it's not going to be a big part of your test. So some of the revolutions, you have the Marathan over the Mughals, you have the United States over Great Britain, you have France over Louis the 16th, right? So France isn't kicking out a different country, they're just overthrowing their own monarch. You have Haiti revolting over France, right? They hear about what's going on in the French Revolution, and they're like, hold up. If you guys are going to say that people have rights, that there should be a better version of government that is not tyrannical, then how can you allow for slavery, right? If you're going to write this Declaration of Rights of Man and preach that there's equal rights among men, then how can you allow slavery to exist, right? So Haiti's calling them out on their hypocrisy and revolting, and they win. And that's the only like successful slave revolt that leads to a new state. And then you have, of course, the Latin American revolutions over Spain. So this is basically, these are your big revolutions. Like I said, don't spend long on France. One thing to remember really quick, if this comes up, the United States didn't actually want, the colonists did not want independence when they first revolted. They wanted to stay a part of Britain. They just wanted to go back to how things were before they were being taxed heavily. It was like, either give us a say in how you're taxing us, or just leave us alone. We don't need our independence as long as one of those two things are true. But as things got worse, eventually more and more people pushed for actual independence. Okay, some of the other movements against authority. This is basically what this whole time period is about. Is just like, people have been telling me what to do for centuries, right? I've been living under this king or this queen for centuries, or I've been living with this like colonizer for centuries. But like, do I need to live that way? Or like, are there other better versions of this? Like, what if you had, what if you had the right to vote, and what if you could actually be equal to all people? So other movements were slave rebellions, right? So you have the Maroon societies in Haiti that are, like we just talked about, that are revolting. Anti-imperialist rebellions, like in India, the Sepoy Rebellion, the Boxer Rebellion in China, right? These are examples of resistance to imperialism. You also have religious rebellions like Taiping, like the ghost dance. It's called the like Xosha ghost dance. Or no, sorry, that's the Xosha cattle killing, I think, is in here. That one also could have been one. The ghost dance is the Native Americans in the U.S. that are performing this ghost dance and are, that's weird, and are resisting culturally, and then the Americans react with violence to them, which was not good. That was basically like Custer's last stand. The Xosha cattle killing, I'm not even going to go down that road. That one's crazy. Read about the Xosha cattle killing when you have a minute. Not this week. Honestly, you don't need it. All of these things then lead to reforms. So you have, people are pushing for change, and change happens. You have the Tanzimat reforms in the Ottoman Empire, self-strengthening movement in China, right? These are movements to provide more rights for people, and eventually they end up kind of like westernizing, modernizing, and so they are reformed. They win. People win. Some of the isms to know: liberalism, socialism, communism comes about here. Feminism, the first wave of feminism is in the 19th century. The first wave is much more about the right to vote and the right to be a citizen, like basic, citizen rights. The second wave of feminism, which we'll get to, is different. All right, and that's revolutions. Okay. All right, migrations. We're going to talk about migrations because there's a lot going on in this time period. So because of industrialization, people are moving to cities, right? Because of imperialism, people are moving to different colonies or are migrating in or out. Because of revolutions, people are leaving places, right? And so some of the causes of all these migrations are that the population keeps growing because of more food and more medicine now. And you have improved transportation. It's actually easier to get places. So I can go to a new job and I can come back. I don't have to be gone forever. It used to be like, if I'm going to go around the world, I'm probably not going to come back. It's too much of a journey. But now I can go around the world and I can come back, no problem. There's different types of migrants, right? You have free will, like wage labor. This is like people who are moving for a new job. Coerced migrants would have been people who are forced to move. So slaves, indentured servants, convict labor, refugees, asylum seekers, right? If you're living in a place that there's a war or there's famine, people are going to leave. And that would be a form of like forced labor. Convict labor, like what we talked about in Australia. Temporary labor is when you are moving seasonally. So people are moving to different countries seasonally in order to get jobs. Some of the impacts of this, you have gender effects where male migrants are leaving, and that's leaving women to then fill the jobs. Ethnic enclaves like Chinatown are popping up where people live in similar societies, like similar culture, around similar culture people. Anti-immigrant policies. So because there's more movement of people, there is more xenophobia, which you guys were also talking about, which is a fear of fear of someone from not in this country. And so you start to see laws that are anti-immigrant, like the Chinese Exclusion Act. So here's the Freemanpedia map. You can get all of his graphics on his site, and they're really worth it because you can see, you can really just like see where people are going. Like you can see there's so much movement into the US. There's a lot of movement in Asia, in South America. People are moving out of the old world more and more and into like the new world, right? Okay, so cutting through some big picture things, you can talk about causation for any of those big things, right? Imperialism. Why? You need new markets and new materials. It's justified by social Darwinism. Some of the effects, racism, unequal development, right? We have countries now that are like the countries we consider maybe like third world are like that because they were stalled in their development. You have, increased migrations of people because of it. Industrialization, why does it start? Because geography was right in certain areas, because you have private wealth, because maybe it's because you just like need to keep up. The other countries are doing it, so we have to do it too. The effects would be working class or the middle class, a factory system, increased militarization, and then for the revolution, some of the causes would be enlightenment, poor conditions, exploitative practices, so reasons why you revolt, right? It sucks here. We can't live like this anymore. Let's try something new. Some of the effects would be independence in some places, civil war in other places, and then new governments pop up. Things you could compare in this time period, you could compare the causes or effects of revolutions. This was a question on the test a few years ago, so it probably won't be again, but it could come up maybe for like the later revolutions too, like in the 20th century. You could also compare imperialism in Africa versus Asia. In Africa, it's more of a direct rule, more political, more about like a civilizing mission. In Asia, it's more about business. It's more indirect. It's more about that sphere of influence. Some of the big changes, obviously, you have industrialization, urbanization, social unrest, nationalism, rise of working class, imperialism, nationalism. All these things are big changes that are happening in this time period. And then continuities, of course, patriarchy, exploitation of people, and migrations. Like, done. Period 5. All right. Seems like your questions on here are definitely more big picture. Okay, this one. Can you review communism versus socialism versus fascism? So we'll get into fascism in a second, but communism is essentially where you have the government controlling the economy too. So there isn't like private free market class system. There is instead like you produce things and you give it to the government, and the government will redistribute it among people in a fair way. Except that when you do that, it means that the government can be like almost like bribed. Socialism is more about the government providing for people, but not necessarily like collecting all of it too. So socialism can be more about the government providing like different supports like healthcare or basic wages, enough money to survive, things like that. They can be supporting people, like kind of propping them up, but it's not necessarily like organizing redistribution. Communism still has a government, it's typically run by one like totalitarian leader, right? So if you think about in Russia, you have, the rise of, like Stalin. Yeah. Pure communism has never been achieved because it really requires like, you can't have it if you have a leader that is also greedy. And so as long as there is a totalitarian leader, it makes it very difficult to actually have a pure communist society. And so we've never really seen it in a perfect sense. We've seen communism, of course, because of Lenin, because of Stalin in Cuba, in different places, but it's never been like a pure form. You still have like some bits of capitalism in there. Oops. All right, period 6, 20th century. Key concept 6.1 is all about science and technology in the 20th century. So, new transportation, cars, planes, space exploration. I mean, we get to space. Think how crazy that is. Just watch that like Chinese movie on Netflix. Hella good. New communication. You have the telephone, the radio, the internet. I mean, massive changes. Like think about 100 years ago, how crazy different things were. And it's not that long ago, Even 10 years ago. Like when I was in high school 15 years ago, I didn't have a lot of the things that you guys have now. We're moving so fast through technology. Scientific theories, like theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, Big Bang, psychology. Do you need to know exactly what these things are? Super no. But you do need to know that they existed, that there was a real boom in science, in understanding science. A lot, because we're increasing our communication so much, we're also increasing our knowledge. And so there's huge new fields of study, new theories. We're also dealing with environmental issues because of industrialization that are getting worse and worse and worse. Greenhouse effect, deforestation, erosion of land, climate change, extinctions. I mean, you guys are children of the 21st century. You know that climate change is a problem that we are going to face. We are facing it now. And so this is starting very much so in the beginning of this time period. We don't really acknowledge it till like the 60s, the 70s. And only now are we like really okay about even talking about it. Diseases that spread. You have two types of diseases. You have infectious diseases, and then you have diseases about like longevity, right? So there's really contagious ones like the flu, like Ebola, like cholera, TB that exist in places with high poverty. The Spanish flu existed around the world after World War I. But then you also have things like Alzheimer's that are happening as people get older because they are living longer. And AIDS is another like massive global epidemic that starts in the late 70s, early 80s, and then spreads across the world and is continuing to spread. Medical innovation. So even though there are different diseases that are spreading, a couple epidemics that happen, for the most part, it's a good time for medicine, for disease, because diseases are being eradicated. And so, we don't have very many instances of polio anymore or the measles up until more recently. But like for the most part, the numbers are still really, really low. So as long as we continue to vaccinate, then we would be okay. Birth control is another massive medical innovation that totally changes things for women, being able to have choice over, your future. Energy innovations like oil, like nuclear power, allow for a lot more energy being used and in different ways. Sometimes they're better for the environment, sometimes they're worse. Military technology, tanks, planes, the atomic bomb, right? So we developed these things during war and they changed our politics after the war as well. The way that we actually fight the war is different. Trench warfare It's like World War I started and they're using tactics from before where they'd like run up to each other, except that they have machine guns, so you can't do that anymore. So they had to dig in and they were really like in the trenches. So they couldn't really, run at each other when there was machine guns. Firebombing, just straight up bombing of cities, increasing civilian casualties. This was totally different than before. The Green Revolution, so really quick description of the Green Revolution. It's basically a new ways to produce food for more people. Starts in India. It's about using new technologies like with chemicals, GMOs, in order to produce like higher yielding crops. So we can actually like produce more food. All right, into 6.2. So at the beginning of the 20th century, you have the collapse of a couple of older empires that had been around for a while. The Ottoman Empire collapses after World War I. The Russian Empire collapses with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. And it really actually collapses in the first Russian Revolution, but then there's this weird in-between where they haven't figured anything out. And so then it's overthrown again, like for good. At least for good as long as there's a Tsar in 1917. And then you have the Qing dynasty as well that collapses in the beginning. And so they're gone. And then other big pieces here. You have decolonization as a massive, event that lasts throughout the century. Sometimes it's negotiated, like in India, like in Ghana. Sometimes there's war for it, like in Algeria, Vietnam, and Angola. But there's always just like pressure for independence. Some of those nationalist leaders that are leading the movements for decolonization are Gandhi in India, Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, and Nkrumah in Ghana. The things they have in common are that they were mostly educated in the West, learned of like Enlightenment ideas essentially, and then use that education to build movements for independence. Some of the regional like ethnic movements that existed were in India. There was a obviously this like independence movement, but there's also a sub movement led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which is for like Muslim independence as well, a two-state solution. This would lead to Pakistan, whereas Gandhi wanted a one-state solution. Let's just stay together, but let's get independence from Britain. The Quebecois movement, it was a separatist movement in Canada, where it was basically about like separating Quebec from Canada. All right, global wars are down at the bottom. Okay, so transnational movements means that they're like movements that span across states. They exist in many different places. Communism existed in many different places. Pan-Africanism would just be like kind of the movement to like bring Africa together. And the same thing in the Middle East with Pan-Arabism. Movements for land redistribution. This would be connected to communism in some of these ways. Also just connected to like radical like socialism. The more like radical you get as a socialist, the more communist you become, right? And so you have just the idea that like land, let's just take back all the land, the government will take it all back and then redistribute it out. So in Venezuela, in Cuba, China, Russia, Vietnam. Okay, if you keep asking for your question to be upvoted, you're going to get banned. This is your final warning. Movements of people between these places, India, Pakistan, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement between Israel and Palestine, South Africa to Great Britain, Algeria to France, Philippines to the United States. Always like in between, like sort of either the regional ethnic movements that are happening, or between the like colonies and the colonizers. 4 genocides in this time period that are identified in the key concepts. There are others like Darfur, Armenia, the Holocaust, Cambodia, Rwanda, in that order. You don't need to get really specific in your understandings of all 4, but you should know that they happened in case you need to use them as examples of violence. Of course, the global wars. Notice how I kind of popped over them a little bit. We talked a lot more about like before and after things, but both of them start for the exact same reason. Somebody put these in the chat already, but basically you have the main causes, MAIN. You could say mania too, but I just use main to make it easier. Militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. Okay, main causes. The Cold War is capitalism versus communism. So you've got the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Korea, Vietnam. These are all these places where communism is affecting them. And in the capitalist countries, it's the US and Western Europe, really going head to head. I did a whole stream on the Cold War. So if you feel like you need more support about that, I would check that stream out. It's from back in, I think, March, maybe April. Even though there's 2 sides of the Cold War, there's also a third side of countries who are like, can we not be a part of this? Like, we're just trying to like develop out here, like Indonesia, like India, like what was the other third way? Egypt. And so really just like pushing for, leave us out of it. Uprisings in 1968. Uprisings again in the late 80s, lots of different protests. All right, and then finally, 6.3, communist responses to economics. You have 5-year plans like Stalin and like Mao's 5-year plan, Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution, failed experiments in terms of like 20 million people died because of the Great Leap Forward because they ruined a lot of like crops. Some of the like capitalist responses to like basically the Great Depression and just like how do we exist in the globalized economy. The New Deal with Franklin Roosevelt, liberalism, free market policies like Reagan, these would all be capitalist responses. International political organizations like the League of Nations, like the UN, the International Criminal Court, just ways in which we've like organized politically across states. And same things economically, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. Some of the humanitarian organizations like UNICEF, like Amnesty International, like the Red Cross. This entire key concept is just like a list of acronyms. Regional trade agreements, the EU, NAFTA. Multinational corporations, corporations that exist across states. We know these are just a few examples, but like you could add Apple, Google, Facebook on any of those as just like huge corporations, Amazon that they're just like, running the world. Environmental movements, Greenpeace, Earth Day. Now you have like the Sunrise Movement, the Green New Deal movement. Notice how the Green New Deal movement really brings a lot of this together. Human rights movements. In the face of the genocides that happened, there's now forces governments to define some of these things, define what genocide is so that we can make sure to prevent it. And then, of course, religion and politics played a role in everything too. So you have like fundamentalism. So like in Iran in the 60s was very like modern Western, like women would wear pants and be able to read and go to school. And then in the 70s, you have a wave of fundamentalists that overthrow the government and put in a leader that is incredibly religious. And so Iran becomes a theocracy, which is ruled by religion. And that changes the course of history, right? So now then Iran fights Iraq, and now we are always at odds with Iran. And then popular culture, right? So pop culture is diffusing. World Cup, the Olympics, cricket, reggae, Bollywood. 2 of these things have become DBQs on that little list, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, you guys got this. Okay, a couple of possible things. Causes. So possible topics that could come up as causation. Obviously, the world wars. You can talk about the causes of them. The effects of the world wars would be like the rise of the U.S. and the Soviet Union as superpowers, and just like less power. Western Europe decreases a lot because they don't have enough money to stay relevant. New weapons, like the atomic bomb, totally change how we fight. We can't go to war anymore, even though it doesn't feel like it. It's actually been more peaceful since World War II in most of history. This is like a really long time for the amount of peace that there's actually been, considering. Mass migrations, millions of deaths, entire generations gone. Decolonization, why does it exist? Because of theories of self-determination. We should be in charge of our own future. Victories of democracies, social unrest. Some of the effects would be like independence of new countries, civil wars, new tensions. Like we always were fighting, but we had kind of banded together against this other, like in India. Like, you have like Muslims and Hindus that are constantly at odds throughout history, but as long as there's a common enemy, they kind of focus on the common enemy. And then as soon as Britain's out of the picture, now we're going to fight each other. Things you could compare in this time period, you could compare communism and capitalist economic policies. That would be a really brutal essay, I'm gonna be honest. But basically in communism, you have, collectivized actions, like 5-year plans, like Great Leap Forward. Capitalism would be more about free market and how can the government support people through that. So we can have a free market, but just to make sure that we are, if you are not existing in a business that is working, that you can still function. Okay. The Soviet Union, or communism in China versus the Soviet Union, both are totalitarian, both come to power through violence. In China, it's more of like communism with capitalism. It's a little bit more mixed. In the Soviet Union, it's like socialism through and through. All right, and then finally, CCOT, rise and fall of, you could talk about some of the changes, rise and fall of communism, tons of new technologies, new social movements, globalization of culture and economics, and decolonization. And then, of course, the continuities would be patriarchy and the power of the West. Even though the Western Europe kind of gets replaced, there's still a lot more. There's still a lot more power in the West. All right, so I want to answer the top question here for sure. Should we mainly review big picture events, i.e. the world wars as an example, or should it be extremely detailed? For example, should we know every dynasty and who major people advancements in tech are, or should we just know that China is one of the most advanced civilizations? Okay, so my suggestion at this point, you kind of have to do both. So I said this last night too. My suggestion is to, if you haven't done this already, take a piece of paper and make 6 boxes in it. And then figure out what were the top 10 events or people or concepts in each time period. Connected to those events, come up with like 3 to 5 terms, right? So obviously World War I would be a big event of the period 6. And so you can have, connect then some of the terms to World War I, like trench warfare, like, League of Nations, Treaty of Versailles, things like that. And that will help you like figure out the top 10 and then connect it to other things. Because you really need to be able to know you have to make sure to know the big events. You can answer any major question you get if you get those big events. But you also need the details because otherwise you won't get the evidence. Okay. So you gotta have both. So I wouldn't just like choose one over the other, I would really make sure to do both, right? Figure out your top 10s and then connect it to other terms so that it's, you can then like explain each of those events using other specifics. Literally forget all battles. You don't need them. You need big events and then big terms beyond that. Okay. I'm gonna skip that one's like really specific. Yeah, so some of these other questions. All right, so let me just show you really quick this. We've got about 5 more minutes before literally I can't go beyond 2 hours on Crowdcast, so it is what it is. Okay, so a couple final tips for multiple choice. Read the source first. When I say source, I don't mean the actual document. Read the little sourcing. Who wrote it? When did they write it? Where are they? Read that first so that you can place it in your head. Then look at the questions. Look at the first question and figure out, do I need to read this question in order to, do I need to read the document in order to answer the question? Okay, so sourcing, read the question, then read the document if you need it. But in terms of 3, questions attached to a stimulus, chances are 1 or 2 of them you don't even need the document for. So don't waste your time reading the little stimulus over and over and over again. Figure out what you need it for. What is it in the question that is asking? Is it asking what their view was? Is it asking what an effect was of this? If you have 30 seconds left, pick a letter, pick B or C, and just fill in the rest of them, B or C. Don't worry about reading those ones. And then don't leave any blank. Answer everything, because you get a point if you're right, and if you don't get a point if you're wrong. There's no penalty. So just always answer it. In terms of the short answer questions, read the source info first, right? Same thing. Read the sourcing first, then read the questions. Make sure that you literally physically stay in the box that you're given. Make sure that you actually answer the question, and you can use ACE to do it. So answer it, cite an example, explain. One effect of decolonization was blank. For example, in India, blank. Therefore, blank. Next. Label A, B, and C. All right, some of the DBQ final tips. Focus on the wording of the prompt, because your thesis needs to answer that directly, and your context needs to loop back to that. You can't just say World War II had just happened. So what? Connect World War II to the prompt. All right, make sure that your context is connected to that. If the prompt says railroads, connect the context directly to railroads. Even if you think it's obvious the connection you made, write it, because the reader cannot infer anything. They have to literally give you points on what you have. Do not use quotes on the DBQ. Use all the documents. Like, go for all 7 rubric points. My tips for the 6 for the LEQ is the same thing. Go for all of it. You don't want to don't be like, I'm not going to go for complexity because I don't need to go for complexity. Nah, go for all of it. Okay. I'm clicking out of this. It's a lot, y'all. Hit me in the chat how you're feeling right now about the test. Give me a 1 through 5. I hope it's better than when you came in. No matter what, I just, it's super late right now. Don't study much more tonight. Get some sleep tonight. I would suggest tomorrow, you could rewatch this video and you could make your top 10 for each time period so that you're really clear about like what are the huge events in each period that you need to remember, and connect those to things. Tomorrow night, we're going to do an LEQ practice. So we'll go through them again. Patrick Laster will be here. He graded for the LEQs last year, and so he'll show you what the readers are looking for. Wednesday night, we'll be live again with just some like last minute questions. Don't burn out. Message us on Fiveable. You see the little chat in the bottom right corner. If there's something that you are specifically stressed about, message me and ask me about it. I'm here for you. And then join the Discord channel, and I can ask more questions there. Interns are in there, and that's it. You got the slides. I'll leave this replay up, and we'll change it out.